Hello, everybody. This is Frank with Iron Age News on the South Florida Conservative News Service, and it is Tuesday, July 15th, 2:30 in the afternoon for all you late starters. And we are going to talk about more with the immigration and have some options here for you when you want to argue with people that there is no new immigration policy out there. While we are having all these riots, mostly peaceful protests, the weaponization of the illegal class in California with the aid of both socialist parties within the United States and almost openly proven bad actors coming out of the state of Mexico. You have to say to yourself, well, when we're doing all this, where are we going to go with it? Granted, everybody who's broken the law, they should go. But what are we going to do in the future? How are we going to handle this issue that has taken decades to become the shithole that it is now, right? So we have to try to look at some positive ways that we can do things to move forward. One of them is to look at bills that were very close to passing and just sort of died. One of those bills occurred in 2013 by your old favorite Marco Rubio. Senator Marco Rubio's immigration blueprint, which was Senate Bill 744, known officially as the Border Security, Economic Opportunity, and Immigration Modernization Act. It passed the Senate, okay, with bipartisan flair, but then vanished. So it never got into the House because of whatever reason, Democrats, right? That I think would be at the time when we see the change from Obama as the porter in chief to the Biden era, which is drown the country in them because we need the votes. But that was two different types of management. You have to give Obama credit for being the slick devil that he was. So let's take a look at this here. Okay. So back in 2013, Marco Rubio was riding high. Okay. He was young, charismatic, and seen as the Republican future. We should put the point, and then he ran into Donald Trump. So he joined the infamous Gang of Eight, which was four Democrats and four Republicans, and helped draft a sweeping immigration bill. The Senate passed this 68 to 32, solid majority. But the House, controlled by Republicans, never even brought it up for a vote. And you have to say to yourself, why, right? But even then, the conservatives were already wary of anything that smelled like amnesty. And this bill had that scent. But to be fair, the Republican Party at that time, which was dominated by Mitch McConnell, had no interest in modernizing this antiquated alien system because construction companies were doing just fine having a two-tiered labor system. But that's just my thoughts on it. And in Mitch's state, where illegal immigration was popular, why not keep using it? If it ain't broke it, don't fix it, right? They were very wrong. So let's get specific about what this bill was. Once again, I am not saying this is a be all end all. There are things that I do not like with it, but you have to start somewhere. And why reinvent the wheel when you could take things that were positive and add other positive things to it now? Like I said, this thing passed it. I would say that that two and four and against was like a landslide these days. Figure now it's just going to be the Republicans if you're lucky. Okay. And that's the same thing in the House. While we still have the chance, is the time to try to get something pushed through. And then we can work with a little bit more. If we continue to just let this thought sit around and nobody does anything about it, what are we saying about why are we spending all this money kicking people out of the country when in 3 years a Democrat could get in charge and just open the floodgates again, right? Why do that? So let's get specific here. Like I said, five major pillars. Number one, border security. And this is from the bill. This is not my interpretations. 90% interception targets at the border. 3,500 new agents is what they wanted. They wanted drones, they wanted fencing, about $8 billion, 8 billion with a B. But remember, this is an older bill. This is 2013. Numbers do change. but you see where they're going in there. A new legal status, which they were calling RPI, registered provisional immigrant, is what it stands for. That would be available to illegals who have been here since before December 31st, 2011. They would have to pay a fine, they would have to pay back taxes, they would have to undergo background checks, and they would have to wait 10 years before they could even apply for a green card, which is still pretty lenient, but we'll see. But the thing is, the background check would probably get a number of them, and so that's the status. You would be considered a registered provisional immigrant. It would bring on what's called merit-based migration. We would totally scrap the diversity lottery. They would prioritize skilled workers and job creators through a point system. Okay, no more just, I've got nothing better to do, I'm coming to the United States. You'd also have what's called temporary workers, which would be similar to what we have now, which would introduce new W visas for low-skilled labor, pickers, sweepers, manual labor types, whatever. They want to create a blue card system for agricultural workers, which is you work, you stay. Questionable on what was all involved in there. There's a little bit more to that I think had to be looked at, but I'm just giving you this so you have an idea when you're thinking about it, what was already could have been done. Okay. Mandatory E-Verify, which is every employer, every new hire within 5 years would have to be signed up with E-Verify. This is a part that bothers me. They're still talking about locking Social Security numbers with a photo match to eliminate fraud. I think all the Social Security cards should be revoked from illegals and from people that are here as migrant workers. That's part of the issue. They get a hold of a Social Security card, they can get themselves a driver's license, and they can do a lot of other things while they're here. So if they decide to stay over illegally, they're already set pretty well. We can simply get a biometric card and track everybody that way. Be much easier. This was because people were lazy in the old days and the Social Security number looked like the way to go. There was a lot of abuse because a lot of times it won't kick in wrong unless you've already tried to apply for benefits. And having a Social Security card alone would be enough for a smart lawyer to say, I'm paying into this. Why don't my people get to stay? No. Okay. That's my interpretation on that. So they wanted to do Social Security cards. I did not. So that's my big thing with that whole situation there. So here's the key question for the audience, especially if you're with President Trump or worried about rewarding lawbreakers. Did the bill allow illegal immigrants to stay without a path to citizenship? So the answer is technically yes. The RPI status was renewable. It gave the right to live and work here, but it didn't guarantee citizenship, and it surely would not give you the vote. That was not stressed back then because the Democrats hadn't decided on this permanent underclass of people who didn't barely speak the language, if at all, and were going to become welfare drags and were going to be used for the census and for the fact to vote to lock in Democratic states. So that would, in my mind, should be changed a bit, but you are not guaranteed citizenship. And that only came after a decade and only if border security triggers were satisfied. You weren't out murdering and shit like that, right? So if you were okay with illegals paying their dues and working, but never voting, that was kind of baked into it, all right? So for Trump-aligned Republicans, that's the middle ground. It's not mass deportation, but it's also not mass amnesty, okay? So section 4, because there's 5. Now let's talk about the money. Who shoulders the burden here? The taxpayer, the farmer, the businessman, who? Okay, the government pays for border infrastructure and the processing bureaucracy. The employers face new enforcement rules, especially with E-Verify. Now, the illegals in this new RPI status, they don't get food stamps, they don't get Obamacare, no Social Security, none of that stuff until they became full green card holders. And the fines would be significant. That's all I can say is they were going with significant fines. And this bill was trying to walk the tightrope, which is humane reform without opening the vault up. That's a lot of wiggle room in there. I think that's a little bit more generous than it should be because realistically, they should only be coming up here at times to work. There should be no downtime. When I was involved in agriculture and I knew guys that had farms, these guys came up. We had people from Puerto Rico, believe it or not. They would come up for the picking season and then they would go home. So you flew them up, you paid them, and they went home. What's not covered in here is the problem, which is that we've mentioned in other videos and other articles, is that the farmer is responsible for the flight up, transport while they're here, their room and board, and their food, which seems excessive. And that's what I said drives us up to that $28 to $32 an hour for a picker. And that's when I would say there's got to be a machine out there that can do the job, or it's time for us to look at how we actually do agriculture, because many people have talked about that as well. So like I said, that has to go away. I don't like the idea of the owner being responsible for a lot of this stuff because this is a security issue. Homeland Security should be involved in it, or Customs, ICE, whoever. But those also should have regulated areas for these people to stay in. Right now, there are companies that supply for a price room and board for them. But you know what? Food is a strategic material. If you want it done, you have to take a very proactive view of it. Food in the United States is 30 to 50% higher because of our labor costs. And you'll say, oh, well, if you put, they always want to say, just say, oh, white people. If you want to put American citizens in those jobs, will it come down? Well, it won't be $28 to $32 an hour because American citizens don't get housing paid for. They don't get transport. They don't get any of that stuff. Minimum wage, I think here is, let's say it's $15 or $16 an hour. I could be wrong, and it's going to go to 18 for picking. You know, that's what you got to say to yourself. Is that worth it then? There's a lot of other variables that we have, because what's going to occur that people don't want to see is with all these modifications being made to these social programs, the social programs are going to get smaller and smaller. So if you are not supposed to be on there, if you don't have the problem you're supposed to have, if you can say, I went out, I don't know how old any of you are, but when I was on unemployment one time for like 3 months, I had to go out and fill these forms in. I had to go look for work. And you had to get somebody to sign the paper wherever you went. So you were still employed, kind of, and the job was to find work. It was a pain in the ass. The people that worked in the unemployment office were always dickheads because they hadn't had a real job, and you were trying to find a real job, and they would act like you were some kind of criminal, right? So that was a bad situation back then. But anyway, let's get back to what I was doing. I'm sorry about that. So that's part of the issue on who's paying and why. These are all failed experiments conducted by the United States government. And I don't believe in a lot of free things. You know, you have to earn things. Even if it's, I hate to say, even if it's a disability, you earn a disability, man. Trust me. I've seen people who've had this. But don't have 92 kids. You know, if these positions are going to be open, you're going to have a job. You're going to be able to get entry level into construction. Everybody who works construction starts sweeping, starts picking up, starts throwing out trash. Nobody gets in there and does the real electrical work or the plumbing. Are you kidding me? It's not how it's done. Even without the union, it's not done that way. Okay? So you have to start somewhere. We're going to have to get over the expectation that everybody is going to, you know, start out as a millionaire. You have to start humble. You have to work your way up. Okay. And that includes the American citizen who for too long has been subsidized by this human crack, which they've been using to fill in the gaps in our society. All right. They have their own countries that can go and work in. They all need stuff picked. They all need things hammered. Right. So here we are. Now it's July 2025. President Trump is back. The border was chaotic. I'll still say it is chaotic because bad actors are still coming over from Mexico, but now they're helping to stir up trouble. A lot less are coming to the border trying to get over. Now, the Canadian border, I hear bad things about, but I have to see more. They keep that down. You know what I'm saying? And people are like, oh, well, that's because they're not fucking white Canadians coming here. It's the Chinese usually. You know, get a grip on your racist ass selves half the time. So the GOP is split between the hawks, populists, and business minded realists. Okay. So they're saying, should Trump use this bill as a base? And I am going to go with maybe. Okay. It with tweaks, which would be a stronger deportation clause, longer delays for citizenship, harder border benchmarks. This could be a framework to unify the Republican Party around a serious and forcible immigration reform. Why don't I include the Democrats in that? Because they have lost control of their party and they are playing a zero-sum game. Anyone who tries to include Democratic Party members and anything with passing a law involving immigration is wasting their time. You can put the paper out there. None of them are going to join because even the ones that would want to join have been threatened. You can find it out if you hang out with enough Democrats. They've been pretty much threatened that they will lose the next time out. They will not get money. They will have the same problems that the Republicans do, where they don't know the next time the doorbell rings if someone's going to shoot them in the face, right? Welcome to Republican land. So Marco's Senate 744 is not an open border scheme. It's a flawed but comprehensive starting point. And I hope that somebody has handed this information, probably Rubio, hopefully, to the president and to the Secretary of Agriculture, because that's the one thing it doesn't mention is all of our immigration shit has to come out from under Department of Labor. Department of Labor treats this like a union dispute because a lot of this bullshit came from Cesar Chavez. If you recall Cesar Chavez, who was the guy who was in charge of the fruit pickers union in California, communist. He hated Mexicans. That was the greatest thing on the planet. Chavez is a Mexican American who hated Mexicans. He hated Mexicans from Mexico. He thought they were beneath him. They used to beat them up and shit, right? So when you guys are out being brown power wearing your Cesar Chavez shirt, stick it up your ass because you don't know what you're talking about, right? That gave them that sort of panache that's been messing shit up for a while. But that's another story for another day. So no open border. Take a long time before you get around to getting a green card. Take an extra long time on how you're going to get in here to get the ability to vote or to become a citizen. And also, we need to go and strictly look at a lot of these other situations like you see with this, what's his name, Khalil. Khalil, I think you're going to find because he wants to sue the government for $20 million, which is the best thing that ever happened because in discovery, they can ask to see inside of his immigration file, which I believe you weren't allowed to look at under the last couple of cases. But we're going to find that Khalil probably pretended that he was a refugee from the other Palestinian Arabs and shit like that. And that's why he had to come over. And that means he lied like a rug because the first thing he does is parrots the Hamas cause. Okay. I didn't know that they conceal your immigration records, especially on refugee status. Something new every day when you're in this business, right? So that's where we have. Take a look at this. It's written out completely on the South Florida Conservative.com. It's on Substack. It's a few different places, but we have it written out so you can look at it. and you have to make these recommendations. If you see something that you like, you can be burning up the emails to your congressman and senator every day. Every day you see something you don't like, you send it to them and you say, why? Well, is it cathartic? Perhaps. Is it like putting a diarrhea together? Perhaps. As long as you don't threaten their life, they have to read it. And that's how these mindless shitbags that run the government in general operate. The more people complain about something, the more they'll actually look at it. When I was working for a city government at one point, we were directed in our entire day's operation by what Fox News had on about the town in the morning. So like at 6:30 in the morning, if there was a scandal, if there was a water main break or city street had collapsed or whatever had gone on, that was our day. We knew going in that this was what we were going to be doing. The phone would ring and say, go divert yourself over here and do that. That's how it was run. We were a reactive community and nothing got done because of that. If we can become proactive with our immigration stuff, things will get so much better. And when I see these people that are like, I'm moving to Portugal and they all did paperwork. That's the greatest part. You ever see the videos where they're like these real liberal shitbags? Oh, I moved to Portugal. I'm doing this. I'm doing that. Well, you know what? They still fill out paperwork to go there. And my answer is, why didn't you surrender your US citizenship? If it's so great everywhere else, and it's so great everywhere else from what they tell me. AOC tells me how great it is, right? That simple bitch from Somalia tells me how great it is. Nobody surrenders their US citizenship. And why is that, right? Because it's worth more than anything else out there. You don't have to be Charlie Kirk to see the numbers, right? So there you go. Enough of my nonsense. Have a good day and be well.